In China, most people live in what we'd call apartment buildings, but here, we usually just call them xiao, which basically means a housing complex. In the US, or a lot of other countries, people usually live in single-family houses with a yard, but in China, it's way more common for people to live in these buildings, so a xiao is more like what you'd think of as an apartment community. Let me show you two xiao near where I live. In China, a xiao is where regular people live day to day. The closest word in English is probably community, but in China, one community can actually include several different xiao. The first one I want to show you was built around 2005. The tallest buildings here are about 6 stories, and there are 11 buildings in total, so it's a pretty small xiao. This type of mid-rise apartment was super common in the early 2000s, and also back in the 1990s. Most of these places come with some shared spaces, like little gardens or outdoor exercise equipment, but honestly, hardly anyone actually spends time there or uses the equipment. Now, here's another xiao. This one was built in the 1990s, and you can tell the buildings look older. They're also about 6 stories tall, but there are more of them, probably a dozen or so that all look the same. This kind of housing was everywhere in Chinese cities during the 80s and 90s, and it was basically inspired by the old Soviet style. With China's huge population, this kind of apartment living made sense at the time. The downside is that people don't get much personal space, but on the other hand, resources and basic services are more concentrated and easier to access. The xiao you're looking at now was also built in the early 2000s. Compared to the last one, the design feels a bit more modern. It even has floor-to-ceiling windows. The tallest buildings here are only 5 stories, but the complex is bigger overall, with almost 20 buildings. The space between each building is more than 10 meters, so it doesn't feel too crowded. It actually gives off a more comfortable vibe. The trees along the roads were just trimmed recently. We get a lot of rain in this area, so the trees grow really fast, and before you know it, they can block out all the sunlight. This xiao has its own property management team, but the fees are pretty low. They take care of things like garbage collection, road maintenance, and keeping up the buildings. Since this complex has been around for more than 20 years now, most of the people living here are older. Before it was built, this whole area used to be farmland. In fact, some of the current residents were actually farmers back then, but as the city grew, farmland disappeared, and the government took over the land to build housing like this. Most xiao are shops built along the side that faces the main street. These spaces are either rented out or sold to people who want to open a business. Restaurants, supermarkets, little convenience stores, you name it. For the residents, these shops make life super convenient. If you need to buy daily necessities, grab a meal, or meet friends, you can just walk a few steps. There's usually no need to drive anywhere. A lot of foreigners notice this when they come to China, that daily life here can actually be really convenient. That's mainly because there are so many small businesses around our xiao. And since labor costs in China are relatively low, the prices in these little shops are often very affordable. That makes everyday life feel easier, and honestly, it adds to people's sense of comfort and happiness. Alright, let's keep going. After 2000, and especially after 2010, China started building tons of high-rise apartment towers. For example, these ones were built only about 3 years ago. Each one has over 30 floors. Before that, the area was full of old, low-rise houses, but they were torn down to make room for these towers. This happened in pretty much every city, and even in smaller towns and rural areas. But honestly, these high-rises usually feel less comfortable, and the apartments themselves are often smaller.